A very good afternoon to one and all. Myself, Dr. Vijaya Nirmala, Associate Professor in the Department of Management Studies. Today, we are going to discuss about the diagnosis process and the area of diagnosis in organization development subject. This is there for MBA second year, fourth semester students. Okay. So in this, we are going to know about diagnostic process and areas of diagnosis. And in today's session, let us see first of all what a diagnosis is. Okay, what is the meaning of diagnosis? Generally, in organization development, diagnosis is a systematic approach to understand and describe the present state of the organization. It describes the present state, in what position the organization is there and what it is going to be done, what are the means of activities. So that is generally defined said as a diagnosis. So the purpose of this diagnostic phase is to gather the information and to specify the exact nature of the problem requiring solutions. Nature of the problem requiring solutions, and also to identify the underlying causal factors, and also to identify the underlying causal factors and to provide a basis for selecting effective change strategies and techniques. For example, what is the outcome of a week, whether it is accurate or inaccurate, or if any faulty diagnosis has been there. So, this will be when you are conducting an organization development program, the faulty diagnosis will be more cost as well as ineffective. As well as ineffective. So, this it means that the diagnosis, it provides the information which is necessary to design the change interventions. It is used to design the change interventions. It means that it allows from successful entry and contracting, which setups the stage for successful diagnosis. It setups a stage for successful diagnosis. That it means that this the process helps the organization development practitioners as well as the client members to jointly determine the organizational issues, how the issues have been there, that is to be focused on, and also it helps in how to collect and analyze the data to understand them. So to understand how you are going to collect the data and how you are going to analyze the data related to the organizational issues. So that will be said in this, identified in this diagnosis. In another sense, diagnosis is happening all the time. That is, the managers or the organizational members and the organizational development practitioners, all these are always trying to understand the drivers of organization effectiveness and how they change and why they are changing in proceeding at a particular way, proceeding it a particular way. So this organizational development practitioners, they try to achieve regarding to make the organization effectiveness, they try to diagnose in how and why the change is going to be processed in a particular way. So that is the general introduction or the meaning of diagnosis. Now let us see what is the process of diagnosis. In general, this diagnosis is a cyclic process. It is not a step-by-step procedure. It is a cyclic process, and that it involves data gathering, interpretations. It involves data gathering, interpretations, and identification of problem areas and also the possible action programs to be conducted. So diagnosis process consists of the collecting data, interpreting them, and identifying the problem areas, as well as identifying the possible action programs, defining the possible action programs. So these are being done in the process of diagnosis. So in this we have several. So you generally used to define these things, and these are defined in certain in certain steps. So there are several steps which are involved in the diagnosis process, right? Now let us see what are the steps. We have 9 steps. We have 9 steps. You can see this diagram. It will be easily understandable to you. You have 9 steps. One is tentative problem areas to be identified. The second one is collect the data, analyze the data feedback, more data needed now. The next one, problem areas to be identified, and the other one is client target motivated to work on the problems, diagnosis work on the problems which causes result in change, and the last one is results to be monitored. So this is the fourth step, that no change. If it is a change, there this process continues, and if there is no change, the same procedure will be continued. So this is how the process of diagnosis will be there. Now let us see deep into these steps. Okay. See, the first, let us see the step 1. What is the step 1 here, ma? Tentative problem area to be identified. That is, in step 1, it involves the preliminary identification. It involves the preliminary identification of possible problem areas that is, these preliminary attempts, and it often brings out what are the symptoms, as well as what are the possible problem areas that is being identified in step 1. And when you come to step 2, it involves gathering the data based on the preliminary problem which is being identified in the preceding step. That in the first step you came to know what is the preliminary identification for a specific problem, right? Based on that, based on step 1, based on the problem which you have been identified preliminary in step 1, you need to collect or you need to gather the data in step 2. Next, when you come to step 3 and 4, this is step 3, analyzing the data. The step 4 is no change at present. So, when you collect the data in step 2, that data is being categorized. That data is being categorized and next it is being analyzed and presented the client in a feedback system. So when once the data has been collected in step 2, it is being gathered and it is being categorized and analyzed. It is being categorized and analyzed and presented the client in a feedback session. Right. So that is done in step 3 and 4. Whether you need to get that is being done in feedback form. It is being done in the feedback form, right? So in step 5, it is determined whether the enough data are available or not. That the data which is being analyzed, whether that data is being determined and that the data is available, the enough data is available or not. That is done in step 5. And when you come to step 6, that is problem areas that are being identified. Here, the client and the practitioner both jointly diagnose and identify what are the likely problem areas. What are the likely problem areas? So that are being identified in step 6. And if you come to step 7, this is client target, which is being motivated to work on a specific problem. That at this point, the client's level of motivation to work is being determined based on the problem, is being determined based on the problem. So that is done in step 7. And when you come to step 8, based upon the diagnosis, based upon the target system, these are being identified and the change based on that, the change strategy is being designed. Based on that, the change strategy is being designed. And when you come to the last step, it is result monitored. The results are being monitored to determine the degree of change that has been attained versus the desired change goals So these are some of the steps in the process of diagnosis. We have 9 steps. Each step is done from the identifying the tentative problem area. Based on that, you used to collect the data and analyze the data, and you get a feedback, right? And you get a feedback. And when you are analyzing the data, you get two things. You require some more data to be added, or no change at present, or no change at present. So if you require some more data, then you have to move with the problem area to be identified, and the client target, which is to be motivated to work on some problems, and then he used to diagnose the work on the problem causes, and finally the results to be monitored. So this is how the process of diagnosis has been made. Okay, and let us move to the next topic, that is areas of diagnosis. Areas of diagnosis means the diagnosis might include the overall assessment. It might include the overall assessment of both the task performance capabilities of the department as well as the impact of the department on its individual members. So the diagnostic process seeks to uncover the specific areas for future development. So to make the department effectiveness, the diagnostic process seeks to uncover the specific areas for future development. So the diagnosis is used broadly more than a medical definition that would be suggested. It means that this areas of diagnosis is a collaborative process. It is a collaborative process. It is a collaborative process between the organization members as well as the organizational development consultants, which are there to collect the pertinent information, analyze the information, and draw conclusions based on the information for action planning as well as the intervention, that diagnosis is, it means that the diagnosis is mainly aimed at uncovering the causes of specific problems. It is used to uncover the causes of the specific problems, and these are being focused on understanding the effective processes or be directed at assessing the overall functioning of the organization or the department, or overall functioning of the organization or the department, to discover the various areas for future development. Discover the various areas for future development. Okay, so this diagnosis process, it provides a systematic understanding of the organization so that the appropriate interventions may be developed for solving the problems as well as enhancing the effectiveness. In the organizational diagnosis, we will come up with the major practitioner skills, and these skills are examined based on two broad areas. These are being done on two broad areas. Okay, so the first area is, it is comprised of various interacting sub-elements which make up the organization. It means that in the sub-elements which make up the organization, it includes various divisions, it includes various departments, it includes various products and relationship between them. So these diagnosis includes a comparison of top, middle, and low level managements in the organization. Not only that, this action research used to make this diagnosis includes the comparison status between the top level, middle level, and low levels of management in the organization. And when you come to the second area, when you come up with the second area, that it is the diagnosis is mainly concerned with the organizational process. It is concerned with the organizational process, and these includes communication networks, team problem solving, decision making, leadership, and authority styles. So the goal setting as well as the planning methods and the management of conflict and competition. So these are, in these two different areas, the diagnosis is being made. So what is the first one, Ma? The first area is interacting the sub elements which make up the organization, and the second area of diagnosis is, it is concerned with the organizational processes. It is concerned with the organizational processes. So in these areas, the diagnosis is being made. Okay, so now now in this session, you came to know what is diagnosis, what is the process of diagnosis, and what are the various areas of diagnosis, right? And let us move to the next topic, that is action research. So this is there in your third unit, Ma. In this you will come to know what is the diagnosis, what is the meaning of diagnosis, and how this diagnosis is being done, and what is the process of diagnosis, and what are the several areas in diagnosis. That you will come to know. And the other topic is action research and organization development. Okay, so this is the topic for you in your third unit. And let us see what is the meaning of action research. Action research is a process of systematic reflection, inquiry, and action carried out by the individuals about their own professional practice. It means that this is a very flexible spiral process. This is a very flexible spiral process which allows action and research. Here, action in the sense change. Here, action in the sense change, improvement, that we call it as action. And research is understanding the knowledge. Research in the sense here, understanding the knowledge. So, this action research is the process which allows action and research. Action in the terms of the terminology, action in the sense change and improvement, whereas research is understanding the knowledge. So, these action and research are to be achieved at the same time. So then we call it as action research. So action is not done at one time and research is not done at other time. So both the action and research need to be done at the same time, so that the action research typically takes place in an applied setting and thus leads to the results and conclusions. It would lead to the results and conclusions that are intended to directly benefit the current practices. It would intended to directly benefit the current practices. Generally, action research is a process theory. It is a process theory which lens through which the organizational development is practiced. It mainly the organizational development practices, the core, the main, it mainly underlies the core organizational development practices. Okay, so that is about action research. Now let us see the definition of action research. According to Cohen and Mannion, action research is essentially an on-the-spot procedure. It is an on-the-spot procedure which is designed to deal with a concrete problem, which is designed to deal with a concrete problem located in an immediate situation. It is being located in an immediate situation. So, generally, this action research is mainly based on the spot procedure, and this used to design to deal with a concrete problem located at immediate situation. And there are also some other definitions that according to Bassi, action research is an inquiry which is carried out in order to understand, evaluate, and then to change in order to improve the educational practices. That is, in order to improve the educational practices, you require a change. So before changing, you need to understand and then you need to evaluate. Okay, so then only the action research will be good. So these are some of the definitions of action research. And let us see the process of action research. Action research is generally aimed both at helping the specific organization implementation which is having a planned change, and to develop more general knowledge that can be applied to the other settings. So, in the process of action research, we have 8 steps. These are very important, and these are the main 8 steps which are there for us in the process of action research. Now, let us see in detail about these process. The first one is problem identification. What is problem identification? So this is the first stage, and this is the starting stage. And in this stage, we usually begin when a key executive in the organization or someone else with the problem, someone else with the power and try to influence the senses that the organization has one or more problems that might be solved with the help of an organization development practitioners. So that is called as problem identification. So what it does ma, so when a key executive in the organization which have a power, they try to influence the senses that the organization has one or more problems, and these are need to be solved with the help of organization development practitioner. That is called problem identification. The next one is consultation with a behavioral science expert. So during the initial contact, the organizational development practitioner as well as the client, they carefully assess each other. They used to be carefully assess each other so that the practitioner has his or her own normative developmental theory. They used to have a normative developmental theory, or they used to have a frame of references, and they must be conscious that those assumptions and based on the assumptions and values, so sharing them with the client from the beginning onwards, they would have established an open and collaborative atmosphere. They would have open and collaborative atmosphere. So that is done in second stage, step 2. When you come with the third one, that is data gathering and preliminary diagnosis. Data gathering and preliminary diagnosis. So this step is usually completed by the organization development practitioners. Okay, so they often have, even though they often have conjunctions with the organizational members also, this data gathering involves gathering the appropriate information. They used to gather the appropriate information and used to analyze it to determine the underlying causes of the organizational problems. The underlying causes of the organizational problem. So in this, we have 4 basic methods. So how do you gather the data? So to gather the data, we have 4 basic methods. One is through interviews, and the other one is through process observation. Next one through questionnaires, and also through organizational performance data. Organizational performance data. Unfortunately, these are often overlooked. One approach to the diagnosis begins only with the observations. The main important thing is it starts with the observations and proceeds to a semi-structured interview. So then the diagnosis begins with the observation, and next it proceeds with semi-structured interview and concludes with a questionnaire that would measure precisely what are the problems identified by the earlier steps. Okay, so that is done in step 3. And the next one is feedback to a key client. Feedback to a key client or a group. Because action research is a collaborative activity, the diagnostic data are fed back to the client and usually in a group meeting or in a work team meeting or in a work team meetings. It means that the feedback which is being this is a feedback step, right? In this feedback step, the members are given the information which is being gathered by the organizational development practitioners, and this helps them to determine what are the strengths and weaknesses of the organization or a unit under study or a unit under study. So the consultant provides the client with all the relevant and useful data. They would present with all the relevant and useful data. So obviously the practitioner will protect various the confidential sources of the information, and also at times they may even withhold the data also. So defining what is relevant and useful involves the consideration of privacy and ethics. Privacy and ethics. So, as well as a judgment about whether the group is ready for the information or if the group would make a client overly defensive or not. So, that is mainly based on privacy and ethics. Based on privacy and ethics. Okay, so the next one, joint diagnosis of the problem. So in this step, the members used to discuss the feedback and they would like to explore with the organizational development practitioners that whether they want to work on identified problems. So they got a feedback in the previous step, right? So based on that, they used to ask the organizational development practitioners that whether they want to work on identified problems, whether they want to work on the identified problems. So there is a close interrelationship which is being exists among the data gathering, feedback, and the diagnosis. Why? Because the consultant used to summarize the basic data from the client members and used to present the data for validation as well as for further diagnosis. For validation as well as for further diagnosis. So that is about joint diagnosis of the problem. And the next one is joint action planning. So this is the next step, and in this, the organizational development practitioner as well as the client members both jointly agree on further actions that are to be taken by the organization. So, in this stage, the specific action is to be taken depends upon only the culture, the technology, and environment of the organization. So when your diagnosis of the problem and the time and expense of the intervention. So based on these three things, the time, how you diagnosed the problem, and what is the time and what is the expense of intervention. So based on these things, the specific action is to be taken depending upon the culture, technology, and environment of the organization, right? And the next step in the process of action research is action. So this stage involves the actual change from one organizational state to the another. That it means that it includes installing the new methods. It used to include installing the new methods and procedures, and it also uses to reorganize the structures and work designs, and also it tries to reinforce the new behaviors. It also tries to reinforce the new behaviors. So such actions typically cannot be implemented immediately. Why? Because it is not an easy task to install new methods and procedures, or to reorganize the present structure and work designing a new work. This is not an easy task. So these actions cannot be implemented immediately, but they require a transition period. They require a transition period. Why? As the organization moves from the present to the desired future state. So when the organization is going to move from the present to the desired future state, these can be implemented in a transition period. In a transition period. Okay. So the next last one is data gathering after action. That is before because of this action research, you know that we have already discussed that action research is a cyclic process. Action research is a cyclic process. Here, the data must also be gathered after the action has been taken. So, when once the action has been taken, then also the data needs to be gathered. Why? Because that after the action, the data needs to be gathered to measure the effect of action, to determine the effect of action, and to feed the results, back to the organization. So this in turn will lead to the diagnosis and new actions, new actions. So I already said that this action research is a cyclic process. When once the data is collected after gathering, the next step what you need to do is it will go to again moves to the feedback to a client server or a group, or that is if you need to make any changes, it moves to step 4, so ultimately this action research model used to underlie the most current approaches to planned change, and also it often considered the synonyms with organization development. Recently, it has been refined and extended to the new settings and applications that the researchers and the practitioners they consequently have made requisite adaptations on this basic framework. So this is what we call the process of action research. Okay, I think you are comfortable. This consists of only 8 steps. It is very easy one. You can understand, right? Now let us see the approach to the action research. It is mainly in problem solving. Action research is an approach to the problem solving. So action research can also be described as an approach to the problem solving. Why? Because it suggests the usefulness as a model, it guides, and also it paradigms as a usefulness, how it is much benefited to the organization. That means that the action research is the application of the various scientific methods like fact finding and experimentation to the practical problems, and which requires action solutions, and also it involves the collaborating and cooperation of scientists, practitioners, as well as the client systems. So in simple terms, action research suggests the various solutions to the burning problems. Action research gives the various solutions to the various burning problems of the organization, and it adds scientific knowledge to the theory also. It adds some more scientific knowledge to the theory. So, one scientist by the name Shepherd. He had made a concept of action research model, how he is going to solve a problem. Solve a problem. With the diagram, it will be easily understandable. And this consists of 6 steps. One is objective, the other one is planning, fact finding, and next one also planning, and then move to action step 2. In an action research approach, the role is to help the manager in planning his actions, to help the manager in planning his actions and designing his fact finding procedures So in such a way that he can learn from them. He used to learn from them to serve such ends as becoming a more skillful manager, and he used to set up the more realistic objectives. He used to set up the more realistic objectives and discover them in a better way of organizing. And this, according to this Shepherd, first the organization will be having or has their own objective, either to change or some other aspect. They have an objective. So according to the objective, they used to plan. And when once it is planned, they move with the action step 1. So this is how you have put into action. So when once the action has been done, it used to come up with the fact finding. What are the actual facts? And after getting the facts, then it used to plan, and finally it moves to the action step 2. So the before planning this action step 2, if there are any changes that can be made in objectives, also in fact finding, also you can convert the object, you can try to change the objective. So this is how the task is mainly to help the managers in formulating the management problems as experiments. So what they used to do, they used to try to solve the management problems as experiments. So in this, that you would like to empower all the participants, that the employees or the who are working in the organizations, they used to empower them, and they used to reflect to generate various models, and in this way we'll be having a low control on the environment, and it used to bridge the gap between theory, research and practice. So this is how the action plan and is being made, and what is the process of action research, and what are the various approaches to that. So that we have been discussed in today's session. In the next session, we used to discuss the other topic. Okay, ma? Thank you one and all.